The forest was quiet, too quiet for a place where death lived on both sides. Lieutenant Karl Meyer crouched behind a broken wall, his breath misting in the cold night air. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the enemy waited, a whole camp of them. His orders were simple: cross the line alone, find out what they were hiding, and return before dawn. It sounded like suicide disguised as bravery. But Karl had never refused an order, not even the ones that made no sense. He checked his compass, tightened his gloves, and started walking into the dark. The deeper he went, the more the world changed. The air smelled of smoke and damp earth, the kind that clung to your throat. He moved past dead trees and shattered trucks, every step measured, every sound memorized. The moon broke through the clouds once, lighting up rows of helmets hanging from branches like warning signs. Someone had left them there, maybe to scare intruders, maybe to honor the dead. Karl couldn't tell which was worse. By midnight, he reached the edge of the enemy's perimeter. Through his binoculars, he saw lights flickering inside a small wooden building surrounded by barbed wire. Soldiers moved in and out, carrying crates marked with symbols he didn't recognize. It wasn't ammunition, he knew that shape. These were smaller, sealed with thick wax. He needed to get closer. He crawled through mud, under fences, until his chest pressed against the frozen ground near the building. Two guards smoked beside the door, their rifles leaning against the wall. Karl waited for the wind to pick up, then tossed a small stone toward a barrel behind them. The sound was soft, but enough. One guard turned, cursing, walking toward the noise. Karl moved then, swift, silent, a shadow with a heartbeat. He slipped through the door as the second guard turned to speak. Inside, the air was heavy with metal and oil. Tables lined the walls, covered with strange devices, metal cylinders, blueprints, and papers stamped with red seals. In the center, a crate sat half open. Karl lifted the lid carefully. Inside were glass vials filled with a pale liquid that shimmered under the lantern light. Each had a label with one word he couldn't read. He pulled out a notebook, wrote down what he saw, and snapped a few photos with his small hidden camera. Just as he turned to leave, a sound froze him in place. A click behind him, the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked. A voice spoke in the enemy's tongue, calm but cold. "You are far from your lines, soldier." Karl raised his hand slowly. His mind raced through lies, through escape routes, through the weight of silence. Then the man stepped forward, and Karl saw his face clearly. It wasn't a soldier. It was a man he knew. The recognition hit like a bullet. 2 years ago, that same face had been in his own barracks, wearing the same uniform as his. The man had vanished during a failed mission, declared dead behind enemy lines. Now here he was, alive, and standing with the enemy. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The small lantern flickered between them, throwing shadows across faces that looked like mirrors of a past life. Karl's voice finally broke the silence. "I buried your picture myself," he said quietly. "You were gone." The other man, Ernst, smiled faintly, not with warmth, but with something colder. "I was gone," he answered, "until I saw what we were really fighting for." His words landed like stones. Karl tried to read the room behind him. No alarms, no footsteps, just that stillness before a storm. "What is this place?" Karl asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Ernst looked at the vials on the table. "A mistake," he said softly. "A mistake your side doesn't deserve to understand." He stepped closer, lowering his weapon. "You shouldn't have come here, Karl." The way he said his name didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like regret. Karl's hand hovered near his coat pocket where his small pistol waited. "You're working for them now?" he whispered. Ernst didn't flinch. "I'm working for something that might stop all this. You call it betrayal. I call it survival." He picked up one of the vials, holding it against the lantern's glow. "They're not weapons," he said. "They're cures. For what both sides have done to themselves." The words made no sense. Karl had heard of secret projects, of new gases and toxins, of lies wrapped in science. But cures? He stared at the liquid swirling in the glass, faintly luminous. "You expect me to believe that?" Ernst's eyes softened. "I don't expect you to believe anything. I expect you to remember that we were once on the same side." Before Karl could answer, voices echoed outside, guards returning. Ernst glanced at the door, then at Karl. "You have one chance," he said. "Hide." He pushed a stack of crates aside and motioned toward a small trapdoor beneath. Karl hesitated. "Why help me?" he asked. Ernst's reply came like a whisper. Because you'll tell them the truth, and I can't. The door swung open above as Karl slipped into the darkness below. Boots stomped across the floor, and through the cracks he saw shadows moving, heard words he didn't understand. Then a shot. The sound tore through the silence, followed by shouts and running feet. Karl stayed still, every breath sharp and shallow. Minutes passed before everything went quiet again. When he climbed back up, the lantern lay on its side, flickering weakly. Ernst was gone. The vials too. Only one remained shattered on the floor, the strange liquid seeping into the wood. Karl bent down, touched the edge of the stain. It felt warm. On the table lay a folded note, scrawled in a familiar hand. Some secrets aren't meant to be owned, only carried. He took the note and slipped into the night, moving faster than he ever had before. By dawn, he crossed back into friendly lines, mud up to his knees, eyes hollow, heart pounding. The men at the checkpoint looked at him as if they were seeing a ghost. "You made it out alive," one said. Karl didn't answer. He just handed over his notebook and camera, then sat in silence as the world around him began to wake. Karl sat in the debriefing tent surrounded by men who spoke in clipped, tired tones. His uniform was torn, his hands shaking from cold and shock. A colonel leaned over the table, scanning the photos he'd brought back. "So what exactly did you find?" he asked. Karl hesitated. The notebook on the table contained the drawings, the chemical notes, and the coordinates, but the secret wasn't written anywhere. It was in the silence of Ernst's last look, in the meaning behind the note. It was research, Karl said carefully, medical, experimental. The colonel grunted, unimpressed. "And this man, your source?" Karl stared at his hands. "Gone," he said. He didn't make it. Days passed before Karl was cleared to leave. Official reports listed the mission as successful, but incomplete. No one mentioned Ernst. The command took the photos, filed them under restricted access, and told Karl to forget what he saw. But forgetting was impossible. Every night he dreamed of that shattered vial and the glow that had pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the floorboards. He knew something had been born in that room, something that could heal or destroy, depending on who touched it. Months later, Karl was reassigned to a quiet post near the border. It was supposed to be rest, but it felt more like exile. One evening, while burning old papers in the stove, he found the folded note Ernst had left him. He had read it 100 times before. Some secrets aren't meant to be owned, only carried. But this time, he noticed a small watermark on the corner, faint but real, a crest he hadn't seen since before the war. It belonged to a medical institute known for experiments that had vanished when the front collapsed. He rode out at dawn, pretending it was routine patrol. The road led him through ruined towns and empty villages until he reached a small valley where the institute once stood. What remained was a single building, half buried under debris. Inside, he found a row of broken shelves, burnt papers, and one metal door still intact. Behind it, sealed in glass, were vials identical to the ones he had seen that night. But these were labeled in his own language. The words were clear: serum prototype, human cellular regeneration. Karl stared at them until he felt dizzy. It wasn't a weapon at all. It was a formula meant to repair what war had destroyed. The enemy hadn't been creating death. They were trying to undo it. And Ernst had died protecting that truth. Karl gathered what he could, sealed the door behind him, and walked away with the note still in his hand. He didn't tell command. He didn't report what he found. He buried the secret deep, where no one could twist it into another kind of war. Years later, when peace returned and men wrote books about the things they thought they understood, Karl's name appeared only once, in a footnote beside a single line. One soldier returned with a secret he never shared. Karl grew old with the weight of silence. The war faded into books and parades, but the memory of that night never left him. He retired quietly in a small village near the woods, the kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone carried ghosts. Some evenings he would sit by the fire, watching the flame flicker on the corner of that folded note. He kept it hidden behind a photograph of his unit, where Ernst's young face still smiled as if time had never moved. The years softened his fear, but never his curiosity. Sometimes, when the wind blew from the east, he swore he could still smell the faint sweetness of that liquid, the one he had touched through broken glass. Doctors said his health was remarkable for a man his age. His scars healed faster than they should have. His eyesight never dimmed. It was as though something inside him refused to age. He wondered if the secret he carried had somehow chosen him too. One autumn evening, a knock came at his door. A young woman stood there in a military coat, holding a folder marked with the same crest from the old institute. She introduced herself softly, saying she worked for a new research division studying lost wartime discoveries. Then she handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper. "We found this sealed in the foundation of the old facility," she said. "It had your name on it." After she left, Karl unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small glass vial, clear and untouched by time. The liquid shimmered faintly, alive under the lamplight. Beneath it lay a note in the same handwriting he'd seen years ago, Ernst's. It said, "You were meant to carry it because only you would never use it." Karl sat back, his breath unsteady. He understood now what Ernst had done. The cure hadn't been destroyed. It had been hidden, waiting for someone who would protect it from every hand that might twist it for power. That night, Karl buried the vial in the woods behind his house, the earth soft and forgiving under his fingers. He marked the spot with nothing, not even a stone. As he covered it, he whispered, "Some secrets are safer when they sleep." Then he stood, looked at the quiet trees swaying above him, and smiled. A small, tired smile of a man who had finally kept his promise. Years passed, and the world changed again. But Karl's life stayed quiet, tucked between the woods and the sound of birds returning each spring. The government forgot his name, the army forgot his rank, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Yet some nights, when the wind carried faint thunder from distant storms, he dreamed of the lab again, of Ernst standing beneath that single lantern light, his eyes filled with something between guilt and hope. The dream always ended the same way. Ernst whispering, "You'll know when to open it again." Karl always woke before the meaning reached him. One morning, decades later, a boy from the village came running to his door. "The flood is coming," he shouted. "The river's broken its banks." Karl followed him outside, and his heart froze. The water had risen fast, sliding down the hillside, cutting through the forest, the same forest where he had buried the vial. Without thinking, he grabbed a shovel and ran. The path was almost gone, the ground turning to mud beneath his boots. He reached the clearing, breathless, rain crashing against his coat. The spot he'd marked in his memory was already half underwater. He dug anyway, the earth soft and cold, his hands trembling with age and urgency. When the shovel struck glass, the sound nearly broke him. The vial was still there, untouched, its glow dim but alive. For a moment, he wanted to destroy it, to crush it before the flood could carry it away. But as lightning split the sky, he saw a group of villagers nearby, struggling to move an injured man caught in the current. The boy shouted, "He's not breathing." Karl stared at the vial, then at the man gasping for life. The decision came like instinct. He opened the cork. The liquid shimmered as it touched the rain, dissolving into the flood like a breath. The air around him seemed to hum, a sound too low for words. When he reached the man, the boy cried, "He's breathing again." Karl looked down at his own hands. They were trembling, but stronger than they had been in years. He felt warmth spread through him, the same warmth he had felt the night the glass broke in the lab. By morning, the flood began to retreat. The villagers spoke of a miracle, how the water had slowed, how no one had died, how the old soldier had saved them. Karl said nothing. He only smiled faintly and walked back to his house, water dripping from his sleeves. When he reached his porch, he felt a strange calm, as if something inside him had finally completed its circle. That night, he placed Ernst's note on the table beside his bed and whispered, "I understand now." He lay down, closed his eyes, and let sleep take him gently. The next morning, the boy from the village knocked again, but the door stayed closed. Inside, the old soldier lay peaceful, his face turned toward the window, the sunlight resting softly on the folded note beside him.